Welcome to the Supply Chain Pioneers podcast, where we highlight industry leaders on the forefront of innovation and technology in planning, procurement, and logistics. Hosted by your supply chain pro to know, Ulf Venn.
Welcome to a new episode of Supply Chain Pioneers. And this time I have with me Clara Beuttenmüller, who is a Vice President of Supply Chain Operations at Philip Morris International. She has great experience in supply chain management, and she comes from a sales background, moved into supply chain operations to then transform herself, but also transform the companies she worked with. You will see it's a great wealth of knowledge that you can acquire here about how to drive change within an organization. And we also talk about a lot of other fun things like Brazilian music, how to manage risks in logistics, but also the biggest disaster that Brazil ever happened. You will hear more about this at the end of the episode. And for now, I wish you a lot of fun. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Supply Chain Pioneers. And with me today, I have Clara. Hi, Clara. How are you?
Hello, Ulf. How are you? Good. Thanks for having me here today.
Of course. No, I'm good as well. Perfect. Beautiful weather. So it's a good time to hang out and chat about supply chain. Why don't we start with a short introduction?
Thank you. Maybe a quick introduction, and I think it really resonates with the podcast today. My whole career has been in supply chain, Ulf, right? I spent my first 13 years in the logistics service provider side, in roles ranging from customer service and operations into business development and sales. First one was Konig, Brazil, a small freight forwarder. Then I moved to Panalpina and finally to DB Schenker. After having, this exposure to the logistics provider side, I decided to take my career to Schneider Electric, where I spent my last 10 years. Started there back in 2013. And again, on a variety of roles in logistics operation, transformation, and finally, supply chain planning. I had the opportunity to live in several countries during this period with Schneider. So initially in Brazil, where we were going through an execution of a big transformation agenda in logistics, and being part of that was quite exciting, laying transformations that we've managed in customs, in last mile delivery, and on the intercontinental flows as well, as we were going more into a model of lead logistics provider and control tower setup. So it was really exciting 3 years in Brazil. Then I moved to Singapore, where I spent 5 years, initially taking care of air and ocean globally for Schneider. And it evolved naturally to control tower, right? So designing it from scratch, defining what the implementation would look like, and then finally running that. And I believe that has evolved over time and really became an important differentiation factor for the supply chain in Schneider, right, in regards to reliability and anticipation. And then finally, I moved to Hungary, where I spent a year and a half more on the end-to-end supply chain planning process, on a period that supply chain was severely disrupted, right, by several factors, and really having the chance to experience that was super enriching for me. And now since May this year, I've been with Philip Morris International. I moved to Belgium, so it's a new experience and opportunity for me as well. And I'm responsible today for the whole global logistics operation. So that means fulfillment, warehousing, distribution, network design, and track and trace. So all in all, I would say supply chain gave me the opportunity of living in several countries and really learning from the experience of different industries as well.
And we're going to deep dive on all of that from here on out. So let's start maybe with the first beginnings. How did you start in supply chain management? What was the motivation to look for your first job? And then the next follow-up question, obviously, is why did you stay?
It came naturally for me, right? I did my studies in foreign trade. Back then, it was all around, globalization. And by the time I started in university and I already, jumped into the freight forwarding industry from the beginning. And from that point on, my career kind of evolved, right, in supply chain, as I said, working on 3 different logistics providers. And I decided as well to continue my studies in supply chain. So I did my master as well in supply chain management. But as you said, I think why we decided to stay, right? For me, it was really because of the dynamics that supply chain brings. And it's not, fancy word, it's really what we live every day, right? And we can see that by working in supply chain, you can bring value to the business. You have the chance to learn continuously. And if we look at the evolution that we have witnessed in supply chain, it's incredible, right? And here, if I go back to my very first job, the level of digitization we had in supply chain was barely minimum. I had to access MS-DOS kind of a system, with the black and white screens in order to know whether or not a shipment had been released from customs, right? So no alert system whatsoever, transaction by transaction interaction, and seeing that how that has evolved, to level 1 reporting, to BI, and to all what we have to do today, with big data and analytics, going to prescription, prediction, and all of that. I think it's great, from having the opportunity of experience all of that, and still today it's exciting to come to work and see the evolution that we have in the supply chain.
As a follow-up question, because you started in a more customer-facing role with customer service, and then you even went to sales, and then you made a move into operations. What inspired this move?
I mean, operation is where really the action is, right? I mean, it's where you feel the drumbeat of how supply chain things gets done. You have the opportunity to make an impact, of course, on the customer delivery experience, and I would say placing supply chain as a factor of differentiation, right? What we discussed before. Delivery reliability and flexibility, it's a factor for customer decision, and we are directly impacting that, right? So that's what operations bring. Of course, on the sales side, on the key account management side, you have the opportunity of other streams, right? But really on operations is where you can have a direct impact. I also would say that it provides a good balance between daily execution, so business as usual, and managing transformation, right? So how you set up your day, your calendar, to tackle the challenge of supply chain operations, but how by taking those learnings, you are able to really build a transformation agenda. And depending on the role that you are, and I think I had the opportunity, on my past experience, including my current one, to really have the chance of balancing both quite well, and that really I enjoy doing. So digital, I mean, I would say it's also another pull factor, right? I think I'm super passionate about everything around digital. Therefore, having the chance of experience that in supply chain and being part of the transformation agenda really, makes a difference for me. So all in all, I would say customer service and sales experience for me were critical. And it helps, and confirms that everything that we do in supply chain takes into account what are the customer needs, right? So the balance between both, it's very impactful.
But also there's another factor that is you do learn different skills in supply chain operations and sales and key account management. What are some of these skills that you learned in the early stages of your career on the customer-facing side that still help you today?
Sure. No, I think on sales, you need to understand what are clearly the customer needs. And sometimes when you receive a tender, an RFQ, a request for quotation, sometimes it's not so obvious what the customer is looking for, right? So when you are working on sales, you really need to dive deep on what are the customers' decision factors, what problem they are trying to solve, this whole understanding of customer needs, and then building something that is compelling. It's not only about the PowerPoint piece, of course, communication. I think it's something that we bring from sales. That you've been on that field as well, but it's how you can translate customer needs into a solution that is simple, right? It's not fancy and not always require huge investments, right? Sometimes it's a really simple problem, and solution. So I think this is what sales really has helped me with. It's on this area. If I go to key account management, right? Because on key account management, you really look at customer needs from an end-to-end point of view, on the logistics side, of course. It's how we can bring people together, right? So you are facing internally different functions of the company, but at the end of the day, what the customer is looking for is one, point of contact, right? So it's really around bringing people together. It's driving change, right? Which for us today, in any project that we manage in the company, in any transformation, it's around stakeholder management, the change management. So I would say this piece on the key account management for me was very important as well. I could continue the list, but for me, the experience I had in sales, leading a team, leading the different functions of sales, really something that I value a lot, that experience. And I'm sure, and I know it has had a very big impact on, how I shaped my career from that point onwards.
In sales, we often talk about challenging the status quo to commit the customer to change, because essentially sales managers, good ones, are also change managers. And a big part of your career was actually spearheading change and challenging the status quo. I don't know a better reference for driving change within an organization than you. What would be like 3 of the most important techniques you have to do that, and what are you willing to share with us?
I continuously reflect on that. I have mentors. I also mentor people. It's really a topic that brings me to reflection all of those discussions. If I would have to list 3, Ulf, first is embracing change, right? It's how you can, having this transformation mindset that you're always, challenging how things get done. You are seizing really opportunities. But equally, it's how, you have the vision, but you have a pragmatic way of delivering results, right? I mean, you need to build the journey. You need to say, okay, this is my North Star, but then you deliver on incremental change. So, not being afraid of change and really embracing that, for me, it's key if you want to drive your career, on that direction. And second is being aware, right? I mean, awareness of what you want to achieve. So once you define what your goals are, not necessarily on a title or a position. For me, that has never been, an ambition, to be very honest with you. It's more around the journey, the continuous learning experience. So if you know where you want to go, which direction you want to head your career towards, is asking yourself if you are having the right experience, the right exposure that will lead to where you want to go, right? Where you want to drive your career into. And third is never stop learning, right? If I am comfortable in a position, right, I would say it never happened, or it doesn't happen very frequently. But, if you are comfortable, if your days go by very easily, if you see that you are not learning enough, I would say probably it's time for you to make a move, right? So, embrace change, being aware of what you want to achieve, build your own journey, own your career development. And never stop learning. Yeah, this is what worked for me. I mean, I hope it resonates with you. And I think looking at your career experience and how you pivot as well during that, yes, I hope it's useful for the audience.
Yeah, definitely will be. The last stop I did operationally was also supply chain planning, and I found that to be a really interesting journey. And you went away from looking at transportation into the supply chain planning world. What was for you the reason to go away from your transportation routes? And then also, what experience helped you there that you had before, and what were the new skills that you picked up?
Honestly, it was about a change, right? And in my career, a few times I had opportunities, let's say, to move one step further in the organization to do the same I was doing, or to do something else, right? It happened when, during the control tower journey. It happened again on the, the supply chain change, and now again, right? So it's really about the learning opportunity, right? It's really saying, okay, if I go to that direction, it means it's a complete new field, let's say, in terms of technical expertise, right? Of course, I have the end-to-end supply chain experience, right? But really going deep into planning for me was an opportunity that my previous position gave me. I would say there are several things in transportation, in logistics, that we can use in supply chain planning, right? One of that, it's risk management, right? How you build, how you map the risks in the supply and demand side, how you make sure that you have the right contingency in place, that you have, a defined plan depending on how things evolve. It's an important, learning from transformation agenda, from transportation scope that we can usually apply in planning or in any other field, right? Second, I would say it's also on the digital roadmap, right? So how you can create transparency with data, how you can use data to improve your decision-making process, but on a pragmatic way, Wolf, right? It's not saying I need data, those buzzwords that we keep hearing. It's about use cases, right? So which problem you want to solve on the demand variability, on our inventory levels, and how you define the right data set the right, form of discussions with stakeholders in order to take the decisions that makes more sense for the company. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about those, type of skills that you acquire on the different jobs you are exposed to, that at the end, yes, you have changes depending on the more specific field that you are in, but I think it provides learning on both ways. And third, if I finalize maybe on this point, it's also about people, right? I mean, it's I met, really great people with high level of expertise during the period I was in supply chain planning. And it really demonstrates that you have to have the right mix between technical expertise, but also innovation and thinking, out of the box, saying, okay, because we have always done things that way, it doesn't mean that we have to continue. It's quite the opposite, right? So I would say having this right mix of expertise and innovation, it's also important. And it's something that I take from my planning period.
Okay, now I want to pivot to the reason why we met, which is you have scaled what I found to be a very impressive internal control tower within Schneider. And that's how we also got together and tackled the risk management portion. But not only I find that to be very impressive, but also Gartner, because Schneider is now the #1 top company in the Gartner supply chains. Obviously, having an internal control tower is quite an investment. So why did Schneider start doing this? And why was it a good idea, essentially, in the long run to work on that kind of route?
Look, I mean, if I take maybe this question from another angle, right? And I would say, both insourcing or outsourcing model work, right? It's really, you need to define clearly, what is your use case, what scope you want to work on, what are the problems you want to solve, which KPIs you want to follow, right? And then it's building the roadmap that leads to what you want to achieve. If you ask 10 different companies that claim to have a control tower, Ulf, they will give you 10 different answers on what a control tower is, right? So it's really important that you define what you want to achieve, right? I mean, and then, of course, having that North Star. What worked for me is, defining what year 1, 2, 3 looks like, which type of capabilities you want to build, which tracker you put in place in order to monitor progress against those targets, right? And of course, it will evolve over time. Each year, your roadmap will look slightly different compared to the version #1, but it's how you really have the right mix between, the strategic thinking, what your North Star is, and then pragmatic deliverables. If you say, control tower is end-to-end, visibility and prescriptive response, that is your North Star. So what you do on year 1, do you build functional expertise, functional data, logistics, planning, manufacturing? Then, as a second step, you define what data accuracy and reliability looks like, how you move from having all those functionals, because you still need those functional data lakes into one end-to-end supply chain process, and how you embed prescriptive capabilities on top of that. So it's a journey, right? I think, and insourcing or outsourcing, it's just a part of that. You need to discuss, and understand what process look like, which technology you want to select, right? Do you want, even on the technology piece, does it make to buy, to make? Do you want to go for a hybrid solution? So I would say it really depends on the journey, the maturity, what problem you want to solve. It really depends on the on the direction that you want to head, and defining for your company what makes more sense.
Essentially, you just gave us a blueprint on how to manage a control tower from day one, which is amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so now you are with PMI as a vice president of operations, which is a big field. How does your day look like, and how is life at PMI?
Thank you for asking. It's really important that we get more acquainted of what the journey of PMI is, right? But PMI has an end goal, which is really to enable a smoke-free future by providing age-legal consumers a less harmful alternative if they don't want to stop smoking, right? It's very clear that no one should start smoking. If you start, you should stop. But if you don't want to stop, that there are other options out there. PMI is the only one in the industry that has made really that bold statement, which is completely changing the business model, right? And this is one of the things that really caught my attention, right? Because the logistics and the distribution model was not prepared for that. I mean, and it's really evolving super fast. So what makes the journey in PMI, I mean, super exciting for me is to enable that vision, right? I mean, coming from a mono-category product, right, with combustible cigarettes to really a multi-category portfolio that's expanding and evolving every time. So I'd say there's a lot about the learning on the fly. PMI, moving totally from the comfort zone and challenging how, because basically we are rewriting history, right? We are rewriting the way that supply chain operates. So what I mentioned before, I mean, all of that for me, it's super important finding a job, right? And I really feel that in PMI, we have that perfect mix of, being able to drive the change and really making an impactful difference on the way that, yes, our company's position, but also primarily for my case on how the logistics is supporting that vision. The complexity and the challenge are increasing, and supply chain needs really to gear up and be ready to show solid added values to the business. And our exposure is bigger, right, every day, and therefore it is the opportunity really to deliver and to accelerate the journey. But it's fun. I mean, it's been really fun 4 months with the company, and it's impressive the way that we are transforming our supply chain here.
Follow-up question on that, because you just talked about the exposure of logistics being higher, which I think is true. The question is, can supply chain, given that we hopefully don't go through another COVID, can supply chain stay on the table and stay as relevant in a company as it is right now in the future? And if yes, what are the moves they have to do to stay there?
No, I think definitely right. I think there's no way back on that. I mean, supply chain today plays a key role in the way that, we provide an impactful differentiation, when we compare ourselves with competitors, how we make sure that our costs are more and more efficient over time, right? So it's around, bringing the right level of information for right decision making. It's around visibility. It's around being ahead of the curve. Having the forward-looking view to anticipate what customers will require next and making sure that our supply chain is ready to deliver. I mean, we as a customers, as consumers, we know exactly what we want. So we need to make, as a logistics function, as a supply chain function, we need to enable that, right? So I have no doubt that COVID helped accelerate that. I think the data and the impact that supply chain brought during COVID times was huge. At some point, everybody was able to talk supply chain back in 2020, 2021, gave more exposure to the function, which is great because then we have the possibility to attract more professionals as well, right, to the function and exchange, right, with the business, with commercial. So, I mean, I would say more and more it's a visible profession that is attracting more talents, and it gives, the right level of exposure that supply chain deserves.
Can't agree more. The reason we have this podcast today is because we want to also make sure people get excited about supply chains and might join us. Okay. Next question is, you already mentioned you have traveled the world from Brazil to Singapore to now you're in Europe. What are regional differences in supply chain management style you have picked up over time? Is there a difference?
Look, I mean, I think on each of these countries, right, you are exposed to different supply chain challenges, right? Not necessarily management style, right? I mean, I think the beauty of supply chain, and I really mean it, is you have the opportunity to work with diversity. I mean, I reflect on all my teams, right? The number of nationalities, background, geography, age, I mean, that we have is super rich. And that is also, what makes it's interesting. So I would say not so much on the management style, but more on the challenge that you face on the different regions that you go. I mean, for me, I mean, in South America, customs, specific in the way that it impacts lead time and costs and duties. So I think over there we have the opportunity to optimize a lot. And I would say that gave me, the opportunity to work a lot on that field. If you go to Asia, for example, I mean, Asia, Singapore, right, is a natural hub for logistics. It's where a lot of innovation happens. So logistics is, ahead in several, streams. So I would say in Asia, it's kind of the opportunity that you have is really about this innovation and how you can leverage and improve, leverage the hub capability and improve flows, right? Improve the way that sustainability is discussed in all of that. In Europe, we have other type of constraints and challenge around, local events, resilience, and how you need to make sure that your supply chain is constantly efficient to respond, to the inflationary challenge that we have. So I would say, all in all, each of the geographies gives you different opportunities of learning and making, it more efficient, I would say, and how we learn from each other, right? So if you have this end-to-end network really well structured, there are several good things which happen on the different geographies because of the different problems that we are facing. It's taking those learnings from one place to the other, right? So creating a network of talents, of experts, where we bring those cases to the broader team, and then we gear the engine to make sure that we are always learning from the process, learning from the events, and making the supply chain better overall. I would say we need to take what happens in all the geographies and make it scalable and scale it up. And learn from the good practices.
One question on, I know you worked also a lot in your career on risks, right? You just mentioned Europe, but I know that you have globally tackled risks in logistics a lot. Is there any exciting case that you managed very successfully that you can share today?
Basically, there's a lot of repetition, right? I mean, you see a lot of events that happen in one geography. You name, I don't know, strike, port congestion, all the obvious stuff. New customs regulation. So there are a lot of events which happen in one place, but basically the way of responding, reacting, and even anticipating with contingency, you can replicate. So during the moment I was running the control tower, and even today, right, what we can see is basically how you define those cases that that we have a high possibility of happening, and you structure your contingency accordingly, right? We had a few. I mean, I won't say the Suez Canal event. I won't say one of the bankruptcy in a major carrier that some time ago, helped accelerate, the way that we manage risk in the companies. But I mean, how you leverage analytics, data, and process in order to always respond better, anticipate risk, and manage that on a way that demonstrate that supply chain is in control, right? Because events will happen. What is important is that you anticipate, you have visibility the moment it does, and you demonstrate that you have the ability to control the situation, to avoid cost, to avoid customer impact, to minimize risks, to minimize costs, and demonstrate that supply chain is in control. I think that is around risk management. And again, events, we have dozens or even hundreds every year, right? It's about anticipation, learning from experience, and securing that we improve continuously the way that we answer to those events.
Okay, last question for today. I do know you're an avid fan of Brazilian music, and I personally don't know enough about that topic. Do you really like Brazilian music because it also connects you back to your roots? And then also, what would be a song that you would recommend me and everybody else to listen to, because it describes what you feel when you think about supply chain management? I
love Brazilian music. Actually, I can. It's whenever I have some spare time, I enjoy listening to bossa nova, to samba, to MPB. It's música popular brasileira, but basically it's Brazilian popular music, where you have plenty of artists that it's just relaxing listen to. It reminds of previous time when I was living there, so I try to yes, I mean, it's something that whenever I have some spare time going back home from the office, I try to disconnect. I don't have a particular music that that could relate to to supply chain, but it's actually a way for me to kind of disconnect, I would say, from the daily challenge. But I really enjoy, and I mean, if you are not familiar with Brazilian music, I would suggest that you look at some important artists like Caetano Veloso or Chico Buarque or Elis Regina. I mean, those are artists that I really enjoyed listening to. But yeah, it's great music.
Yeah, no, I get that. And it's good also to have an out, right? To wind down. You have a lot of passion for what you do, but you also need an outlet. For me, it's sports. For you, it's music. It's great.
Also sports. I mean, as long as Brazil is not playing Germany, in the World Cup semifinals.
That happened. This will never happen again. I can promise that. That was a very big and that was a risk outlier, actually. Yeah.
It was that we didn't see it coming, but I would say, we still cheer up for you on the final in Maracanã. Yeah. So well done.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody has this one moment of glory, and Germany had it there. I think that was really good. Now not so hot anymore, actually. And with that anecdote on football, we wish everybody a great day. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Wolf. I did enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Clara. It was great. Yeah, thanks for being here. And now I should have said that before. Anyway, have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
This was Supply Chain Pioneers. Thanks for watching, listening, or however you are enjoying this podcast. You can find Supply Chain Pioneers on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all other major podcast players, as well as on YouTube at Ulf Talk Supply Chain. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next time.